What if everything you thought you knew about Donnie McClurkin's confessions was just the tip of the iceberg? What if the headlines you remember from nearly 2 decades ago barely scratched the surface of his truth? Tonight, we dive into the unseen layers of one of gospel music's most celebrated yet controversial voices, uncovering the hidden pain, the battles no one wanted to talk about, and the triumph that reshaped his entire life. The story first broke in the early 2000s, when Donnie McClurkin's words rocked both the gospel world and the secular media. Known for his stirring performances and timeless songs like Stand and We Fall Down, McClurkin shocked audiences when he confessed his struggles with sexuality, abuse, and personal demons. The headlines blared with sensationalism, painting him as a man trapped in contradiction, a gospel minister speaking openly about desires and conflicts many considered taboo. Newspapers and blogs reduced his testimony to quick soundbites, stripping away nuance and presenting him as either a hero for some or a hypocrite for others. At the time, the media ran with one narrative: a gospel singer caught in controversy. Few bothered to ask what lay behind those words, or how they connected to a life of deep trauma and spiritual wrestling. For years, the image of Donnie McClurkin was locked in that frame: the man who confessed, the man who struggled, the man caught between identity and ministry. And for many, that was the end of the story. But as years passed, new layers began to emerge. In recent interviews, McClurkin himself has admitted that the story people think they know was incomplete. He insists that the early reports barely touched the surface of his reality, and that only now, after decades of silence and reflection, is he ready to reveal the full truth. Behind the microphone, Donnie McClurkin is a powerhouse, but behind the scenes he has been a man carrying heavy burdens since childhood. His story begins long before fame, long before the Grammy Awards and sold-out concerts. It begins with wounds that shaped his soul. As a young boy, Donnie endured unspeakable trauma. He was sexually abused, and the scars of that experience lingered for years. This violation left him confused, angry, and searching for answers in a world that offered none. He often speaks of how those moments twisted his understanding of trust, intimacy, and self-worth. These are the details the early headlines ignored, the context that makes sense of the confessions he would later reveal. The media rarely addressed the fact that McClurkin's words were born from deep pain. Instead, his vulnerability was turned into controversy, leaving him isolated under the crushing weight of public scrutiny. Behind closed doors, Donnie wrestled not only with the expectations of being a gospel icon but also with the unrelenting voices of critics who questioned his faith and identity. And yet, he pressed forward, using music as his lifeline. Each lyric, each soaring note, carried the hidden weight of his testimony. Songs that inspired millions were for him moments of catharsis, whispers of his journey through darkness into light. In his recent interviews, Donnie McClurkin has begun opening doors he once kept locked. He speaks candidly about how his early confession was never meant to be a scandal. It was a cry for honesty, an attempt to reconcile faith with the reality of his past. He describes nights of solitude, where he begged God for answers, trying to reconcile his trauma with his calling. One revelation he shared was the sheer loneliness that consumed him. McClurkin admitted that, despite his fame, he often felt profoundly alone, wrestling with emotions he couldn't always share even with those closest to him. He detailed conversations where he confided in trusted friends, explaining that his words were not about making a statement to the world but about unburdening his soul. He recalls the backlash vividly. Some church leaders distanced themselves, worried about their reputation. Others whispered behind his back, reducing his testimony to gossip fodder. Yet, in those painful moments, Donnie says he discovered an inner strength. Each criticism, each judgment, forced him to dig deeper into his faith. And in doing so, he learned something remarkable. Confession, no matter how misunderstood, was his pathway to freedom. The journey from confession to transformation was not immediate. It was a slow, grueling process of healing. Donnie McClurkin describes it as peeling back the layers of his own heart, confronting the lies he had believed, and reclaiming his identity not through the eyes of critics but through his faith. His music became both shield and sword. Albums released in the years following his early confession carried hidden messages of resilience. Tracks like I Call You Faithful and Great Is Your Mercy weren't just performances, they were testimonies of survival. Fans sang along, not realizing they were echoing the very affirmations Donnie used to rebuild his spirit. Triumph also came in his ministry. Despite the controversy, Donnie continued to preach, to lead, and to pour into others. His willingness to remain visible, even when mocked, inspired countless individuals who felt alone in their struggles. He turned shame into testimony, and testimony into transformation. Most profoundly, Donnie now speaks of peace, not a peace that denies his past, but one that embraces. He acknowledges the trauma, the confusion, the mistakes, but also the healing, the forgiveness, and the grace that carried him through. This is the part of the story early headlines missed. The triumph of a man who refused to let his struggles define his destiny. Still, whispers remain. Behind the scenes, some insiders suggest that McClurkin's openness has ruffled feathers among powerful church leaders who prefer to keep such topics hidden. They claim that while Donnie's transparency has helped many, it has also drawn criticism from those who see his honesty as dangerous. "He's too open," one insider allegedly remarked. "Some truths are better left unsaid." Others whisper about relationships Donnie has kept private, friendships that have sparked speculation, and moments where his transparency may have cost him opportunity. Whether these rumors hold weight or not, they add to the intrigue surrounding his journey. What cannot be denied is that McClurkin has consistently chosen to speak his truth, regardless of the consequence. There are also whispers of private meetings, where Donnie was allegedly urged to tone down his honesty, to present a more sanitized image of a gospel star. But if these stories are true, Donnie resisted. He knew that hiding his scars would betray the very people he wanted to reach, the broken, the hurting, the ones who needed to know that healing was possible. Reactions to Donnie's revelations have spanned the spectrum. His family, though protective of his privacy, has stood by him through the storms. Siblings and close relatives have occasionally spoken about their admiration for his courage, noting that it takes immense strength to confront personal demons in public. Fans too have rallied around him. Social media is flooded with testimonies of people who credit McClurkin's honesty with saving their lives. One user wrote, "Hearing Donnie admit his struggles gave me the courage to face my own." Another tweeted, "People judged him, but they don't realize he's speaking for thousands who can't find their voice." Even fellow celebrities have weighed in. Some gospel artists praised his bravery, while others admitted they would never have dared to reveal so much. Still, the consensus is clear. Donnie McClurkin's journey has transcended music. He has become a symbol of vulnerability, resilience, and redemption in an industry that often hides its wounds. As we reflect on McClurkin's story, one truth emerges: headlines never tell the whole story. The media of the early 2000s captured a moment, but not a man. They focused on the controversy, but not the context, and in doing so they left out the most powerful part: the transformation. Donnie's journey teaches us that vulnerability is not weakness, it is strength. It reminds us that public figures are still human, carrying scars we may never see. And it challenges us to look beyond the surface, to seek the full story before passing judgment. In a world driven by viral soundbites and quick judgments, Donnie McClurkin's transparency is a radical act. He invites us to see not just his flaws but his faith, not just his struggles but his survival. And in doing so, he extends an invitation to us all, to embrace our own journeys, no matter how messy, and to find triumph in the midst of trial. But perhaps the most pressing question remains: is Donnie McClurkin truly finished telling his story, or are there still layers he has yet to reveal? Truths too painful, too complex, or too misunderstood to share just yet. As he continues to minister, to sing, and to open up in new ways, one thing is certain: his journey is far from over, and whether you see him as a flawed man or a faithful witness, his life forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that every confession carries more than we first imagined. So what do you think about this news? Let us know in the comments below.